coming up. Is that it? Okay, cool, sweet, good, perfect. All right, I'll hang up the phone here.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our Google Hangout tonight with Dr. John DenBoer. Dr. DenBoer is the founder and director of Mental Edge Tennis, and he's a licensed psychologist. So he specializes in providing mental coaching to competitive tennis players. He works with many professional tennis players and junior tennis players to help guide them towards ensuring they're giving themselves a mental advantage over their opponents. So he's going to be talking about how to stay mentally focused during matches and what you can do to give yourself a mental advantage over your opponents. And if you haven't seen it yet, there's a sidebar where you can type in questions. So Dr. DenBoer is going to be answering your questions directly. And we actually have an Athletic DNA backpack, which we're going to give out at the end to the person who asked the best questions throughout the chat. So thank you very much for joining us, Dr. DenBoer.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you for joining us. So we have a lot of people here, and they're already asking a lot of questions.
Awesome.
Why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you do with Mental Edge Tennis?
Yeah, I'm a tennis player myself. I played Division I college tennis, and I got a major in psychology as an undergrad, and I went on to get my PhD in psychology with a specialization in neuropsychology. So now what I do is I play tennis competitively, more or less recreationally, and I do mental coaching with tennis players, all the way from junior tennis players to professional tennis players.
Okay, so what all do you do with your players when you work with them? Is there anything in particular to focus on to help them gain a mental advantage?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different things. I mean, one of the primary things, Ben, is just teaching players to stay in the present moment. When we're too focused on what's happening in the future, we become anxious. When we're too focused on what's happened in the past, we become, sort of remorseful or depressed. And so the goal is, during a tennis match, to stay in the present moment more often.
Okay. So when you analyze a lot of the top players in the world, what separates the top 20 players in the world versus players ranked in the top 100?
I truly believe in the end it's mental ability. Jim Lair, who is a really well-known sports psychologist and developed the 15-second cure with tennis players, said that mental toughness is the ability to be at your best the most often. So being mentally consistent allows us to be consistently at our best the most often. And the players that are in the top 20 are players that are at their best most often. They're not having one tournament where they're amazing and the next tournament they're doing poorly, but the results are consistently high throughout a year in order to get ranking points. And you have to be mentally consistent in order to be physically consistent.
Do you think what you do in practice helps carry over to what you do in matches?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the best players are those that practice well. So I see a lot of juniors that are out there that are watching the top players in practice courts, and there's you go to Grand Slams, you go to Indian Wells, and there's a lot of opportunity to do that. So if you watch the way players practice, they are practicing at a really, really high level, but they're practicing smart. Roger Federer might have a great 30 to 45-minute practice, and that's all he needs. And so I would really encourage you to watch mentally how players approach practice, because they are very disciplined, and the ones that aren't performing consistently. They aren't achieving those consistent results.
Okay, well, we're starting to get some good questions here. Aiden Rivas asked, what are some rituals that can help you gain confidence?
Hey, Aiden, that's a really, really good question. Some of the things that you can do, I think, are, one is doing breathing. Breathing is really the foundation of all mental skills, and people that don't breathe well can't really progress on to good skills. So one of the major things that you can do is learn how to do deep diaphragmatic breathing. What that is breathing in through your nose for 5 seconds, holding for 2, and then doing a slow breath out of your mouth for 5 seconds. So it looks kind of like this. And if you do that for 2 minutes prior to a match walking on court, and if you do that for 30 seconds in between changeovers, that will really help oxygenate your blood and allow you to not just think more clearly, but to have your muscles more responsive for a match. That would be the #1 thing that I recommend to any tennis players is proper breathing.
Okay. And then Chris Lee asked, how do you stay in the present? I mean, I think what he's asking is, there's a lot of times in matches where so many different things are going wrong. You're hitting shots, you're missing shots that you typically make. How do you stay in the present moment to readjust to stay on the task at hand?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris Lee. I think that's really the idea, is that you have to practice these skills off the court. So having a professional mindset really makes you practice mental skills off court. So what you can do is you can practice mindfulness-based skills that will allow you to stay in the present moment. And there's a variety of skills. Breathing is the foundation. There's something called mantras, where you focus on the way your hands feel against a grip, or the way that your hands feel against a ball. But the biggest thing is to give yourself proper time to be able to enlist these skills. So really, I would ask the people that I work with to give me 30 minutes a day, every day, practicing mental skills off court. And there's a lot of different mental skills that you can practice, but mindfulness-based skills for tennis are primarily breathing, mantra use, looking at transforming anger through focusing on the senses during a match, and then having all those things cultivate into zone training. So those are the video series that I have on my website, but that's the basic mindfulness skills for tennis.
Okay. Now somebody else asked, Natalie asked, it's actually a great question because it's kind of cross-training with tennis. She says, I'm thinking about running a half marathon and she really struggles with staying mentally focused. What are some exercises she can do to help improve her mental edge, and not even just in tennis, but also in off-court training?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest things, Ben, is, as Natalie highlighted, is that this is something that we have to practice in our lives, and it comes out in our tennis. We can't just practice in our tennis and expect it to be right there. So we can use it in all facets of our lives. One of the biggest things that you can do, Natalie, is to try to, before you're going to sleep at night or when you're waking up in the morning, try to visualize yourself performing at a high level while doing the breathing. If you can do that over a period of weeks, if you can visualize yourself, then what you can do is when you're running or when you're playing tennis, you can enlist that skill. It will come more easily to you because your mind has visualized it. So breathing in the deep diaphragmatic manner that I described, and then also visualizing performing well. Not just positive self-talk, but really, really detailed visualization of the event as it's happening in the future.
Okay. So are there any things, what are things that you've done for yourself, like when you're in matches and you're losing? Is there different tactics you try, or things you do, or different rituals that you have for yourself individually that have worked well for you?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest things that I talk to players about, and that works for me, is of driving a mental wedge. So if you're a tennis player, everybody's had the experience, right, of what people say getting rolled in a match. And getting rolled is essentially like the match starts and then the next second it's over and it seems like it just went by really quick and you lost, right? You lost like 2-2 or something like that, and you think, what happened? I didn't really have a chance to correct myself. The biggest thing that you can do is take time. Time is always something that's there. You always have time between points. You always have 90 seconds and changeovers. What I do is I use a note card, and so you can get a note card just like this. You can buy it in an office store, and I write 3 mental goals for myself before every match, and then on the other side I write 3 physical goals for myself every match, and I refer to that note card in between changeovers. It's perfectly legal. There's nothing illegal about it, and I don't see enough players really using that. But what this does is it allows you to use the changeover time productively, and allows you to keep coming back to your game plan. So use a note card in every match. It may be different for every match that you play, but that's one tangible thing that you can certainly do, and something that's worked for me.
Okay, yeah, that's a great idea, and I know I've seen the Williams sisters do that a lot, where they just they'll pull out cards on changeovers and to really help them ignore all the noise of everything that's going on around them.
Yeah, I mean, try to use the changeover productively.
Yeah, absolutely. Sebastian Rodriguez asked, when it's very hot out and he's really tired, what are different things you should do in the heat to really help him stay mentally focused?
That's awesome, Sebastian. I live in Phoenix primarily, and it's really hot here all the time, even when it's not hot. So that's a really good question. I mean, one obviously is to really try to hydrate yourself. You can do that, obviously before a match, but also during a match, and also trying to use a wet towel behind your neck. You see the pros doing that at the Grand Slams, especially at the Australian Open. But try to continue to breathe. You saw Novak Djokovic a long time ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, having problems at the Australian Open with breathing in the humidity. So try to continue to take deep breaths during the changeover to allow your body to oxygenate, because your brain requires water, but it also requires oxygen. And so that's certainly a way to stay cool, and maybe getting in a cold shower after the match or in between matches would help too.
And this is a great question too, because when I first started off playing junior tennis tournaments, I really struggled with this. It's from Chris Lee. He asked, during my tournaments, I get nervous and it makes me play much worse. Is there anything that he can do that just play his game and not worry?
Yeah, I mean that's a huge question with a lot of different answers, Chris. But a lot of players, probably the number one reason why players come to me is that they practice a lot better than they play, and we've all seen players that do that. I would say that one of the biggest things for you, Chris, is to mentally put yourself in situations during practice that you're going to encounter during a match. Too many times what you see is players that are practicing and they're just banging balls from the baseline for 60 minutes, and they're not putting themselves in match-tough situations. So I recommend it when you're practicing to really practice like you play. Put yourself in a match-type situation where there's a lot of pressure on you, where there's something on the line, and continue to practice in that format. There's a reason why Pete Sampras only practiced sets. He practiced in pressure situations, and he practiced the way he played. So that's number one that I would recommend. And two, I would also have a game plan. Make sure that you journal before you go on the court, or have that note card, and try to stick to your game plan. You do that enough times over time, it's going to work out for you.
Okay, and remember, everybody, there's you can type in questions, and he'll answer everybody's questions. So are there particular mental exercises or drills that you should do just on a daily basis that you recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me grab some of my tennis balls here.
Okay.
All right, so you guys can see these. These are tennis balls. These are actually all my signed balls. This is our Nadal ball, and then we have a Tom Gorman, who's the Davis Cup, and Mike and Bob Bryan when they won the U.S. Open.
Very nice.
And got that one on court, and this is a Roger Federer ball. You guys can't see these signatures, I think. But what I do, all these balls are about the same. So what I do is I have my players close their eyes, and they feel each ball. And they close their eyes and they feel them for about 10 or 15 seconds, and they go through all 4 balls. And then when they're done with their eyes closed, they identify which ball is which from just the feel. And if you can do that reliably with 5 balls, then what you're doing is you're paying attention so much to the ball in the moment that nothing else is in your mind. And that's what you want to do when you're on the court. If you can do it that well, when you get on the court, then when you get struggling, or you have your thoughts are wrapped up in what's going on off court or the pressure of the situation, try to go back to your ball. Try to think about how much you focused in that moment, and focus like that. If you can do it that way, then you won't have any other competing thoughts in your mind. So I do have people do this drill, this 4 or 5 ball drill, every day.
Yeah, that's definitely a great drill, because, like you said earlier, whatever you do in practice, that's what carries over into the matches and everything.
And you can do the same thing, Ben. You can do the same thing with your racket grip. So this is like an old racket that I have, obviously, but you can do this with your racket grip. You can take different, if you have 5 rackets, you can take your racket grip and do it by the feel of your racket grip. And you want to learn to identify which grip is from the other, because these are all sensory mantras, meaning these are things that we can pay attention to in our senses, that we can ground ourselves in a match. It helps us focus on the present rather than focusing on the future or the past, or getting distracted by what might be happening off the court.
Yeah, of course. So are there any final tips or anything that that you work with a lot of juniors. You see a lot of the common issues and things. Any final tips or advice for all of our juniors watching?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I could recommend overall is have a professional mindset. And what I mean by that is if you really want to play professional tennis or you want to play at a high level or Division I level, you need to treat it like a doctor in an ER would treat it. So like when you go to the ER with your parents or something happens to you, you have no doubt in your mind that that doctor, no matter what is going on during their day, is going to do 100% for you, is going to give 100% accurate care. When you walk on the court, you are trying to be a professional, just like that doctor. So you need to have a mindset in that similar vein. If you don't want to play professional, you don't want to play Division I tennis or a high level at 2 or Division III, then you don't need to have that mindset. But if you do, then that's a mindset that you need to carry through, and that mindset will guide your actions for sure.
Yeah, I mean like you've been saying all along. You know what you do, the mindset you have in practice. It's crazy how that carries over into matches. And if you have a lackadaisical week of practice, you can expect not to see the best results that you're going to see over the weekend.
Absolutely, and then I would maybe add that one of the other major issues here is with parents. You don't rely on your parents, even if you're a younger child. Try to be independent of your parents and try to have some independence when you're playing. I see too many kids, too many juniors looking over at their parents when they're playing, or looking over at their coaches. When I was playing when I was younger, we were taught not to do that. We were taught to be independent. So I would encourage you to have an independent mindset and not rely too much on your parents or coaches when you're on court.
Okay. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up all of the questions we have coming in. So I do want to reward one person here. It looks like Chris Lee was asked a few great questions. So Chris, congratulations. You won a free Athletic DNA backpack. So just send me an email at ben@athleticdna.com, Chris, and we'll get the backpack for you. So Dr. DenBoer, thank you very much for the time. I know it's a Sunday night. Appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule and with all of our juniors.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys on court. And if you have any further questions, you can visit my website, mentaledgetennis.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Good night.
All right, have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.